Hi everyone, welcome back to this part 4 of the ultimate guide of Darklings. So in part 3 we've seen like the different strategy that you can use as Darkling, so either playing for cult, for network, or for pure in-game points. And today we'll follow up with what kind of opening will you do if you choose one of these strategy, and also some consideration of how you follow up after that. So what kind of building order that you use when you're playing Darklings. So let's go. So the first kind of strategy or first round plan that I want to consider with you is focusing on cult in round 1. So in that case, often it will be better if you can pick the priest tile, and often it will be available. It's not unusual that it's the 3rd bonus pick or even 4th, so you have a good chance of having it. And you will open with Temple, and usually you take Earth 1 because that's the most flexible option that you have, and go for the priest action, meaning that you'll have in your inventory 3 priests to start with. So you will do this when there's good bonus on the fire, earth, and water cult. So you have 3 priests, no one else has any, so you should be able to establish a really early cult dominance. So that's really a way to focus on cult, still get an interesting opening with Temple and Earth 1, so you still have points potential. It's not all in on cult in this one. But then you also have very strong cult, so and that's really one of the strengths of Darkling. They can be faster than anyone on the cult track because of their initial priest, so that's a way to exploit that to the maximum. Imagine if you can get the 2 key town with this kind of start. It's almost like 2 cult and that are granted, and one which is really well underway. So interesting strategy. Second strategy will be to, rather than play for cult, it's more kind of linked to a play for network, where you'll try to pick expansion fast. So there's different version of this, that's why I have 3 starting dwellings here. Maybe you'll have one here and one here and one here. It can be possible for both, and there can be reason to do it for both. So usually again, if you can get Earth 1, it's usually a most flexible. Not getting Earth 1 is not the end of the world. In the fast expansion, often it means that you feel you have to rush toward competitive hacks, so maybe you don't have time to take Earth 1. Especially, say, if there's Nomad and you think you really need to beat them to this hex or this hex, maybe you don't get Earth 1. It's not the end of the world, especially since you kind of committed to go for network, so maybe going for a second economic favor will be perfectly viable. So then there's 2 options to do it. Either you started with the priest and you'll go for the 2 workers, or you started with 2 workers and you go for the priest action. So you end up in the same place with 2 extra workers and 1 extra priest, meaning that you can do 2 digs, and you'll use it to build 2 dwellings. And ideally you'll want to use them either here or here, because that kind of helps you to link 2 black hexes together, meaning that you kind of expand faster. But there's also the situation where you start at center and you want to secure very fast these 2 hexes because they are very important for you to build your town. Your town will be a lot more efficient, a lot cheaper than if you have to, say, build a bridge and triple dig this one. So this way you save the bridge, you save the triple terraformation. So maybe you'll want to get these hexes as soon as possible, and then the start can be interesting for this purpose. So the big problem here, of course, is that you're kind of quitting on cult in round 1, really. But yeah, if you're committed to go for network, if you think that you have a good chance, can be a good option. Or if you think you can go for points, but for some reason you really feel you have to rush these hacks here, for example, and want to expand as soon as possible, getting workers, then maybe you can consider this. So a variation on the fast expansion plan will be, usually it's when nomad are here. Um, you'll do again, you take Earth 1, but rather than going this way, you'll go north. That's usually especially if you plan to connect north, that will be the case. That's why I put the dwelling there, because it's more frequent in this way. So maybe either you took the shipping bonus and then you take the 2 worker, or you got the 2 worker and you'll take the bridge. But either way, you go to these 2 hexes, and that's your plan in round 1. So yeah, going for these 2 with the same idea. So the third plan, which is kind of my favorite and the one I think you should aim for when you're playing Darklings. If you can get the 1 worker 3 power, it's a nice flexible start for Darklings to get this one. You do a temple, get Earth 1, again, most flexible favor. Maybe if there's Nomad or Fakirs even here, you'll want to take that hex here and go for something different. So depends, and maybe you won't be able to get Earth 1, and it should never be the end of the world with Darkling, because you have a very strong way to score points with your faction ability. So getting Earth 1 is not getting Earth 1, I mean, is not the end of the world with Darklings. You should be ready to sacrifice it if there is an interesting upside an interesting advantage that you can gather in exchange. But you won't, if you can have it, it gives you more flexibility because it puts less pressure on you to connect. And then you'll build, if you can, you build 1 dwelling here because you have this worker. So maybe you'll go for this hex, for example, if it's very competitive. Or you'll send a priest to the call track if for some reason you cannot get a second priest. Or if you can get a second priest, you can do both, which is the best of 2 worlds. But so whatever, I've put the 3 there, but whatever cult which has the best call in com, then you will target. What if you don't have this bonus and you still want a flexible start? I think most of the time you should look for a flexible start, and even if you don't have, like often you will get, for example, the 4 coin bonus with Darklings, because often you pick them first. And in that case, I usually prefer to send the priest on the cult track still. Even if I just build a temple and don't build any dwellings, it's still very fine. So the key here in this flexible start that I've explained here is not the extra dwelling that you put, it's the idea that you get 1 priest on the cult track, and even if you don't get the extra priest to do the extra dwelling, you can save your power to use it to make sure you build a sanctuary round 2. So that's really the key here. You want to build your sanctuary round 2, and that's what you're going for. So the flexible start, you have some presence in the cult, you send 1 priest on the cult, not crazy like the cult focus one, but you send 1 priest on the cult, and you do your temple and prepare for your sanctuary in round 2. That's really what it is about. Okay, so what next then? Once you've done your start, how do you intend to follow up? So what I want to consider with you is the usual building order for Darklings. So in what kind of way Darklings build their building? Because Darklings, especially in the early round, they almost always do the same thing. So usually you get your temple up in round 1 and get Earth 1. And then you go in round 2, you'll get your sanctuary, in which you take an economic favor. I see many people, so often you won't even build dwellings in between those, but you go for your sanctuary straight because that's your most powerful and most important building. You want it up as soon as you can. So often I see people go for water 1 here. It's a mistake. Maybe 5% of the time you should go for water 1, but no more than that. Almost always go for an economic favor. It will give you such a boost for your game. So almost always target an economic favor. If, for example, for whatever reason you don't get Earth 1, I would say in round 1 then you get an economic favor, say Fire 1. And when you get your sanctuary in round 2, you don't get water 1 even then. I mean, the best option is usually really most of the time to go for 2 economic favor. So if you got fire 1 with your temple, take air 2 with your sanctuary. I recommend not taking air 2. As I said before, air 2 is not very useful for Darklings because they almost never use the spade action that you have on the action bar. So their power, the main use for their power is to get coins. And you might be thinking, well, what about the 7 coin action? Should not the 4 power help you for that? It's true, but if you think about it, the 7 coin action gives you only a 3 coin bonus, because you could always, it costs you 4 power, and you could always convert these 4 power to 4 coins. So the upside of going for the 7 coin action is just 3 coins. So when you consider this light, you see that the 3 coin favor tile, it is the equivalent of gaining the 7 coin action every turn, because it gives you a bonus of 3 coins. So there's really no interest in going for air 2, and I think that I see often strong player going for air 2, and I think that's almost always a mistake. So fire 1 is your go-to choice in some circumstances where there's a lot of good earth called bonus income. You'll go for earth 2, and again, if you don't get earth 1, and then you go for both of these economic favor. And the reason for that, so why don't you go for water 1? It's because you'll do a temple later in round 4 or 5, and once you get the temple, then you go for water 1. It's usually still there, and there's really no rush to build it. You really hurt your economy by taking water 1. So in your building order, once you have your stronghold, your sanctuary up, you want to expand, and the way you will do that is doing a lot of dwellings. So that's one of the reasons you want fire 1. Again, Darklings are looking for sources of coin external to their buildings, because they rarely keep trading post up. They will either build dwellings, which are more efficient, or a temple, because that's what gives them their spades. And once you get for when you go for the temple, then you can go for water 1 and start building your trading post and scoring with that. It's a much more efficient way of playing Darklings. Once you have that up, you'll usually do another round of dwellings once you have your temple up, and then whatever gives you more points in round 5, 6. So depending on what are the events, you will go for one of these following. Usually, yeah, if you go for a temple, probably at this point it's because you want fire 2, you're going for 3 towns and you need fire 2, and that's main reason for picking up a temple with Darklings. So usually you do the temple in round 1, the sanctuary in round 2. Ideally you dwelling 2 with it, if you can if you have the economy for it. Then round 4, 5 you do round 3, 4, that's when you do another temple and as many dwellings as you can. And you'll go for whatever. So usually Darklings are flexible enough to do whatever is the track asked to them in round 5, 6, and that's what you should listen. I usually prefer the stronghold in round 6. I think round 5 is a little early for it, but it can be done still. Of course, there's all kind of way that this kind of structure can change. Sometimes the temple will come right after the sanctuary. Sometimes you'll be able to do your sanctuary in round 1. So you have to remember that's kind of a very general guideline I'm giving you here. The main strength of Darkling is their flexibility, and you should be attentive to that. There might be here a question of what if there's a temple event in round 2? Do you still build your sanctuary? And the answer will be almost always yes. I would say 95% of the time you still build your sanctuary, even if the temple is 4 points. And the reason for that, it's almost the same cost. So the temple, if you build a trading post in a temple, it's 4 workers and 8 coins. if you build a sanctuary, 4 workers and 10 coins. So it's just a few coins different. And the sanctuary, the big upside is that you don't lose the dwelling that you upgrade to a temple in the other version. So if you upgrade a dwelling to a temple, then you lose the worker income from the dwelling. While if you just upgrade a temple to the sanctuary, you don't lose anything. You just gain a favor tile. So it means that with the sanctuary rather than the temple, you're getting a worker income more than you would have. And if you think about it, do you sacrifice, in round 2, do you sacrifice a worker income for 4 points? And the answer is no. It's a terrible mistake to do so. The worker income is way more valuable than the 4 points early on. So you should almost always, even if there's a temple event, when there's a temple event round 2, I usually find it's a good event for Darklings, because you'll get coins from the priest you send to Coltract, because it gives you 2 coins for every priest you have on the Coltract. But not because I want to build a temple in round 2. I'll almost always go for the sanctuary anyway. So yeah, just a little parenthesis on this question. I wanted to say the sanctuary, the lesson here is the sanctuary is really strong. And if you have opportunity to do it in round 1, you should do it in round 1 most of the time. And we'll see a bit later how to do that. What are the ways to do that? So sometimes if you succeed to do the sanctuary in round 1, it means that everything will go a little faster. You'll do a bunch of dwelling in round 2 and go for the rest in the following round. So it will give you, it's almost save you a round if you succeed to do your sanctuary in round 1, which is huge. So yeah, definitely something to look for. So finally, an alternative building order. I think it's inferior, but every now and then there will be like a sanctuary event in round 3, and for some reason you think it's more important to expand in round 2. So if there's, say, a dwelling event in round 2 and a sanctuary event in round 3, then of course you'll kind of change a little the structure to adapt to that. Again, Darkling's strength is your flexibility. So it's possible you do a temple, say, in round 1, do a bunch of dwellings, and do your sanctuary in round 3. Now it's a little later in the game, and you already made a bunch of dwellings, so kind of better economy rather than from favor tile, from dwelling income, meaning that at this time I prefer to go for water 1 with the sanctuary in round 3. So it also has the upsides of not needing a temple in round 4 or 5. So in round 4 or 5 you'll rather do dwellings and trading post, and then whatever you need in round 6 again. So that will be a little different sequence, but can be effective too. But again, you have to have kind of special circumstance to apply that. Okay, so that concludes this part 4. In the next part, which will be the last of the Ultimate Guide of Darklings, we'll see more in detail what kind of are your options to build a sanctuary round 1, how you can do it. So often you'll think it's really hard to get your sanctuary round 1, but we'll see it's not. And we'll consider different alternative openings, so those openings that you can do in special context, which are all, I think, interesting. So I hope to see you then. Until then, bye, and